Star Trek has introduced us to countless alien societies over the years with all kinds of different cultures and laws. Of course, all of these societies have their own pros and cons, but it's clear that some are more progressive than others. Of course, we can't really judge a pre-warp society by the same standards as an interstellar empire. This is why the Federation waits to make first contact until a species has become warp capable. But sometimes a society can invent warp drive and still be regressive in other ways. So here we're gonna focus on alien societies who have made it to the final frontier, but hold on to harmful old-timey beliefs and standards that hold no place in the future. With that in mind, I'm Bree from TrekCulture, and here are 10 species who need to get with the times. Number 10. The Fangi. The Fangi are a notoriously hyper-capitalist society. They also have an incredibly sexist history of banning women from wearing clothes or participating in their society at all. They didn't even invent warp drive themselves, instead purchasing the technology from someone else. The Fangi absolutely bear mentioning here, but unlike some of the others we're going to be talking about, the Fangi actually became much more progressive towards the end of the 24th century. Quark and Rom's mother Ishka kickstarted a revolution in Ferengi society when she began helping Grand Naga Zek run the Ferengi economy, as his mind was slowly slipping from his old age. She stood up to sexist Ferengi customs by wearing clothes and participating in business, and worked to change her society for the better. Later, thanks to her input, Zek appointed her son Rom as the new Grand Nagus, who, along with his wife Lita, further pushed the Ferengi people toward equality and even future membership in the Federation. By the time we saw Ferenginar in Lower Decks, their society was still toxically dominated by corporations, but they were getting better and gender equality was becoming much more normalized. Besides, on this list we've got bigger fish to fry. Number 9. The Antidians. The Antidians are, of course, an incredibly handsome species, at least according to Worf, but they have deep psychological issues with space travel. In the Next Generation episode Manhunt, 2 Antidians, one played by Mick Fleetwood of Fleetwood Mac, came aboard the Enterprise, and we learned that the fish-like species is so traumatized by space travel that they put themselves into voluntary catatonic states while in space for long periods of time. In this state, they are still conscious but act strange and unresponsive. This species was eligible to join the Federation before they tried bombing a diplomatic conference, so they must have been warp capable, but simply terrified of space travel. Going into this altered mind state would apparently help them cope with the stress of the ordeal, but come on guys, it's not 1996 anymore. We don't need to go into stasis for a simple interstellar journey. We have warp drive now. With all the modern amenities aboard the Enterprise D, you could hardly tell if it were a spaceship or a luxury hotel. Visit the beach on the holodeck for some fresh air and enjoy the trip. At least we saw some Antidians aboard Starbase 25 in Lower Decks, so they may finally be warming up to the idea of space travel at least. Number 8. The Vulcans. Vulcan society is supposedly built on logic, but they actually have a lot of arbitrary social rules and standards. Fellow Vulcans bullied Spock as a child because of his human heritage, and they generally viewed themselves as superior to other humanoid species. Another issue with Vulcan society is that they are incredibly resistant to change or being corrected. Their closed-mindedness even led to denial about time travel and a stigma against mind melds well into the 22nd century. Since then, time travel was proved impossible to deny, and mind melds have proved useful in numerous situations and saved countless lives ever since they became more normalized. Seeing the Vulcans reunite with their lost Romulan cousins in the 32nd century shows that they are capable of change and becoming more open to opposing ideas. But it's clear that there are a lot of unnecessary stigmas in Vulcan society that may be holding them back. Number 7. The Romulans. The Romulan Star Empire has a long reputation of cruelty and intolerance. They left their Vulcan siblings to live free of Surak's teachings, but ended up becoming far more oppressive than the Vulcans ever were. Shortly after colonizing the Romulan system, they enslaved the local population of Remans, forcing them to mine dilithium, construct weapons, and serve in the Dominion War. At times, even the Romulan people themselves suffered due to their actions. The secret Romulan organization, the Zhat Vash, was behind the synth attack on Mars, which crippled the Federation rescue fleet meant to evacuate the Romulan people when their planet was destroyed by a supernova. Even the destruction of their world wasn't enough to change their attitude towards other species. We saw a Romulans-only restaurant on the planet Vashti, and many blamed humanity for what happened. Just like we mentioned with the Vulcans, reunification of the Vulcan and Romulan people in the 32nd century signaled that the Romulans may finally be opening up to other cultures. Number 6. The Heroen. The predators of the Star Trek universe, the Heroen, are feared across the Delta Quadrant for their deadly hunters who would track down any prey they consider a good prize. Captain Janeway, during a conflict with the Heroen, came to a truce with them and offered them holographic technology in the hopes that they would stop hunting sentient humanoids if they had holograms to hunt instead. Unfortunately, as Janeway knows very well, holograms like the Doctor became self-aware all the time, and of course the Heroen went on to specifically program them to be more realistic and to actually feel simulated fear. Their suffering wouldn't even be relieved by dying, as they simply respawn over and over after each awful death. In the end, Janeway didn't really end the suffering, but instead passed it on to an oppressed group of artificial life forms who Starfleet also has a long history of disrespecting and treating like property. We last heard about the Heroen in the Picard episode No Win Scenario, when in a flashback near the start of the episode, Picard talked with a group of cadets about an encounter he had with the Heroen while serving on the Enterprise E. Rumor has it that the Heroen Alpha came to the Alpha Quadrant specifically to hunt Picard, showing that their ways haven't changed that much since Janeway's little experiment. Picard explained that Worf was able to construct a trap that turned the hunters into the prey. We still don't know how the Heroen got to the Alpha Quadrant, or what their grudge was with Picard, but it's clear that they didn't come to make friends. Number 5. The Ocampa. The Ocampa are in an interesting position of having incredible potential while being held back by complacency. Ocampa have highly powerful telepathic and telekinetic abilities, but ever since the Nicene destroyed their planet and forced their society underground, the Ocampa grew dependent on the Nicene caretaker, who watched over them to repay his debt to their world. The Ocampa's mental abilities slowly worsened as they relied more and more on the caretaker's gifts and began to worship him as a kind of deity. The caretaker feared that once he was gone, the Ocampa would quickly fall prey to the Keson. There was, however, a small group of Ocampa who left their homeworld under the watch of the female Nicene, Suspiria. These Ocampa were far more skilled with their abilities. Many could manipulate objects on the subatomic level and even enter a realm of pure thought. They also managed to increase their lifespan from 9 years to about 20 using new technology. It really seems like the caretaker was holding back the Ocampa on the homeworld from reaching their true potential. Hopefully, though, Ocampan society will be able to evolve even more without him. Number 4. The Keson. The Keson are unremarkable to the point where the Borg literally refuse to assimilate them. The different Keson sects are deeply divided and constantly fighting with each other over natural resources. Ever heard of post-scarcity? Their technology was so very limited that before Voyager arrived in the Delta Quadrant, the Keson had never seen a replicator or a transporter. Keson society was also highly patriarchal. Keson women were excluded from most positions of power and treated as lesser than their male counterparts. Seska was, of course, allowed to hold positions of power as a woman, but only because of her knowledge of Voyager and their advanced technology. Unfortunately, the Keson never got the chance to naturally develop into a spacefaring society. They were used as slave labor by an alien species called the Trabe, and were only able to escape by stealing their oppressors' ships and technology. Hopefully, given enough time, they will grow more enlightened and stop terrorizing their small corner of the Delta Quadrant. Number 3. The Changelings. Long ago, the leaders of the Dominion, the Changelings, were subjugated by a group of solid life forms, creating a deep resentment in their culture towards so-called solids. This hateful philosophy was a major factor in the Dominion War, as well as the Dominion's harsh treatment of species in their control. When the war with the Federation ended, the Dominion retreated back to the Gamma Quadrant, and Odo returned to the Great Link both to cure his people and to convince them to treat solid life forms better. It's unknown to what extent Oda was successful in changing his society's bigoted views, but we do know of an anti-peace faction that broke off from the Great Link to form an alliance with the Borg Queen of all people. This group, led by Vatic, experienced horrific trauma at the hands of the Federation, so their anger was understandable, but their revenge plot of helping Earth be assimilated was ridiculously evil. We can only hope that the broader Great Link has become more kind towards solids. Number 2. The Malon. Malon society is incredibly dystopian. Unlike most warp-capable species, they do not recycle the antimatter waste created by their industries. Because of this, Malon space is extremely polluted with theta radiation. Entire industries were created to transport this waste away from Malon Prime, and they would often dump it in uninhabited areas, poisoning the local population. Janeway offered a Malon waste exporter the recycling technology, and he denied her, explaining that this technology would destroy his business. Clearly, many Malon were economically incentivized to maintain this status quo. Transporting and dumping antimatter waste across space not only poisons vast regions of space, but also the Malon crew aboard these ships. They would often develop sores and other health problems from routinely being around toxic substances. It's clear that Malon society could easily change its ways by developing cleaner technology, like the rest of the galaxy uses, but many of them have a profit incentive to keep the waste export ships running. Number 1. The Humans. As the Q, the Organians, and many others have said, humanity is improving quickly, but still has a lot to learn. Humans have done a lot of evil stuff. Alongside their aforementioned experiments on changelings during the Dominion War, they continued to use artificial life forms like holograms and synths for unpaid labor, even after learning that Data, Voyager's doctor, and many other artificial life forms could become sentient, not to mention all the potential sentient holograms killed daily on the holodeck. The Federation's ban on genetic manipulation could also be seen as a backwards policy, largely inspired by humanity's bleak history with augments. In addition, the human-dominated Section 31 has committed countless crimes against the Alpha Quadrant, manipulating the Romulans into joining the Dominion War being just one example. These problems persisted after the 24th century, and humanity later went through a period of increased isolationism after the burn, eventually even leaving the Federation for a short period of time. Still, just like every other species on this list, we have the potential to be much better and learn from our mistakes. And those were 10 species who really need to get with the times. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up, and let us know what alien species you think need to get with the times in the comment section below. If you never want to miss an update, then go ahead and subscribe to us here on YouTube. And if you want to keep up with us on other social medias, you can find us on Twitter and Blue Sky at TrekCulture and on Instagram at TrekCultureYT. You can also find myself on all 3 of those platforms as well under the handle TrekkyBree. And with all that being said, I hope you all have a great year, and don't forget to live long and prosper.